Alright, so boom, welcome to lecture 3 of the Tony EDU private mentorship series. So this lecture's title is Top Performer Study Stack, Unlocking Your Memory Potential. So let's begin. So we always start with the lecture structure as usual. We're going to talk about the importance of effective study techniques. Then we're going to talk about the 20% of study principles, which is essentially the major principles that I believe are most beneficial in terms of studying as a CAPE student specifically. So these are like the top study principles based on my research that I've gathered together and put on this lecture. Then we're going to talk about the ultimate study stack. And then we're going to talk about my personal formula for hyperlearning. So let's start off with the importance of effective study techniques. So in my opinion, being able to study effectively is probably the one skill set that is most important. It's a meta skill set because it allows you to learn anything. If you can study well and you can learn well, you can basically become anything because you can learn any piece of information that you're given. In the context of CAPE, however, being able to effectively study allows you to improve comprehension, retention, and recall. So this is the basis of your examination. As a student, your examination requires you to comprehend the information on the syllabus, retain that information, and then recall it in the exam. So that is the basis of doing well in the exams. So hence the reason why it's important to learn effective study techniques, because the basis of you doing well in your exams is rooted in your ability to effectively study. So the next point is that it saves time. As we have already established, based on the previous lectures, we already know that time management is the holy grail. Time management is basically the heartbeat of being successful in anything. You need to manage time, time waits for no one, and how you fill those time blocks that are going to be spent anyway determines how well you do in exam and in life. Being able to study effectively and learn efficiently allows you to manage your time in an effective manner. And this gives you the opportunity to do more in less time, which essentially brings me to the third point, which is your output increases. You get 2 times better, you get better 2 times faster, and it frees up your time to do an extra subject. So let me just use an example to kind of illustrate this a bit better. If I am able to study effectively, and after 1 hour of work, I could get 25% of the syllabus done. It will take me 4 hours to complete the entire syllabus. If my classmate takes 1 hour to get 15% of the syllabus done, it would take him around 7 hours to complete the entire syllabus. This is assuming that I am a more effective learner and studier than my colleague, than my classmate. So I have an entire 3-hour edge on my classmate. So it takes me 4 hours to complete the syllabus, while it takes him around 7 hours to complete the syllabus. And that's just me learning at 10% better and 10% more effectively per hour. So now let's extend that edge, that little edge of 3 hours, let's extend that out. So if I'm doing 4 subjects at CAPE, it would take me 16 hours to complete the syllabi for the entirety of my CAPE year. CAPE Unit 1, I'm doing 4 subjects. It takes me around 4 hours to complete each syllabus. So it will take me 16 hours to complete all the syllabi, right? However, my friend who takes 7 hours, it would take him 28 hours to complete the syllabi for the same 4 subjects. So we're doing the same 4 subjects, but because he learns at 10% less efficiently than I do per hour, it takes him 12 more hours than me to complete the 4 syllabi. So 12 hours of advantage, 12 hours of better studying. Now, these are 12 hours that are going to be utilized towards studying anyway. So why not allocate that towards doing another subject? So now when you have these extra hours, you have these extra hours on your classmates, on basically your competition. Every classmate you have, all your friends, everyone who you know right in CAPE is essentially your competition, because you all are vying for the same few spots of scholarships, of being the top performers in the Caribbean. So we could see how having this extra 12-hour edge allows you to do an extra subject, allows you to do an extracurricular activity, which allows you to get into a better university. So this is why it's extremely important to have effective study techniques, because it dovetails into time, and time being the holy grail allows you to have an increased output. Also, if you want to do SATs in addition to CAPE, you have an extra 6 to 8 hours, 12 in this example, but realistically speaking, you probably have an extra 6 to 8 hours to allocate towards something like writing SAT. So now let's talk about the 20% of study principles. So these are the principles that I believe helped me to unlock my maximum memory potential. During CAPE, my studying was extremely efficient, hence the reason why I was able to get 5 subjects done and get all ones, 10 ones at CAPE. So let's talk about the Pomodoro technique. So I'm pretty sure you've heard of the I'm pretty sure you have heard of the Pomodoro technique, but I'll still give you a definition for it. So the Pomodoro technique is a simple time management method where you work in focus blocks. So usually it's 25 to 30 minutes. After every 25 to 30 minute block, you get a short break. After every 4th Pomodoro session, you take a longer break. And it's designed to improve productivity. You take smaller breaks in between, you get more tasks done, so you have more energy. So basically, time blocking and Pomodoro technique is one of the major study principles that I utilize. Then we're going to talk about retrieval practice. So retrieval practice is a learning strategy where you actively recall information from memory to reinforce your knowledge. Instead of passively reviewing material, you actively try to recall and remember the material you read. So I'll go into this a bit more when I talk about my personal hyperlearning formula. But retrieval practice is basically you read an information with the expectation that you need to recall at some point. So there's a difference between simply passively reading a book and reading a book for the sake of understanding and grasping all of the concepts with the hopes of regurgitating it in the future. Then we're going to talk about distributed practice. So distributed practice is a learning approach that involves spacing out studies or practices over a long period of time. You're not going to cram the night before. You're not going to try to do the syllabus a couple days before the exam. You want to distribute and space out your study sessions, and that helps with long-term memory and long-term recall. So now that we have those 3 principles here that I utilize personally for doing well in CAPE, let's talk about the ultimate study stack, which is multisensory learning. This is my personal research. Trust me, I've done well at CAPE. So we could only consume information through a select few stimuli inputs. So we could either read, we could either hear the information, or we could either write it. We can't smell it, we can't taste it, but we could read it, we could write it, or we could hear it. You could see it with your eyes, you could have some level of sensory input through writing, or you could hear someone call it. Those are the only 3 ways in which you could input stimuli. So what you want to do is, you want to utilize all 3 of the input points of stimulus to maximize retention and recall. So now we're going to actually go into the exact study stack that I personally use for 10 grade 1s at CAPE. So let's start with number 1. We're going to read the text. So when we read any text, we're going to use retrieval practice. So instead of just passively reading through the text, we're going to actively try to memorize what we're reading right now. We're going to put focused energy and attention into what is being read in front of us. We're not going to have music playing. We're not going to have our phones next to us. We're going to be focused. So we're going to read the text in a focused manner first. Then we're going to write over the information that we just read. So with writing over the information that you just read, you don't necessarily want to just copy over the notes. You want to try to at least recall some of the information you just read without reading the textbook. But obviously, if you can't remember, just go back to the textbook and write it over. Then I would read the notes that I just wrote. The main reason for that is these 3 points here. I've read the text, 1 input, I've written it over, another input, and I've read it over again through my own synthesis of the information. So that's why it's important to not simply copy the notes from your textbook. It's important to read it, understand it, try to write it in your own words, and then read over what you wrote in your own words, because that's your personal synthesis of that information. Then I would do past papers. The main reason for doing past papers is because you recall and you pull the information out of your brain. You train yourself to effectively withdraw information from your brain based on what you previously learned in relation to what they asked you. Remember at the beginning of the lecture I mentioned that learning is about comprehending, retaining the information, and recalling it. That's what doing the past paper does. You have comprehended what you just read and wrote and read one more time. You comprehend that information, then you retain it, you remember it, and then you recall it through doing the past papers. And then finally, I would teach my friends. Main reason being, it really gives me a bellwether as to whether or not I actually know the information. Because if you can't explain it to somebody else, then you probably don't really fully grasp it. So I would read it, write it, read it one more time, recall it by doing past papers, and then recall it one more time by teaching my friends. Now we're going to go into the exact thing that I used to do when studying. So this is exactly what I did. This is exactly what I do to this day. I'm actually currently on a 90-minute cycle recording this lecture right now. So preferably we'll be in monk mode. I'm currently not in monk mode, but preferably when we're studying for CAPE, we want to be in monk mode. The main reason being, during this period you're locked in. During this period your sleep is intact. During this period your phone is on do not disturb 90% of the time. You're not on social media. You don't have a bunch of bullshit information running through your head. You're fully focused, your mind is clear, and you're fully tapped into the work. So preferably we'll be in monk mode. Then I would time block 90 minutes. So, as I said in the previous lectures, you should get a timer. So I would set a timer to 90 minutes. I would take my phone off, lock myself in a room, probably put some earplugs in, probably put a hoodie on. So putting a hoodie on definitely helps. Just keeps you kind of tunnel vision. And then I'll put some binaural beats in my earphones, my earplugs. So the binaural beats, I have binaural beats. I have 90 minutes of binaural beats available on mtonyedu.com. It's free. Or you could go straight to this YouTube channel right here and get the binaural beats for 90 minutes. Just turn that video on, put your earphones in, put your phone on Do Not Disturb or your computer on Do Not Disturb, however you choose to consume it, and then just sit down for that 90-minute block and get shit done. So in the first 30 minutes, which is why it's important to get a timer. In the first 30 minutes, I would read my notes. So as I said, you're not just passively reading notes, you are actively reading the notes. You're reading the notes to try to remember it. Then I would write these notes down. So I would write the notes, not just copying over the notes, but I would read the notes, comprehend it, understand it, and try to rewrite it in my own way. If I'm not able to remember, if I'm not able to fully comprehend, I'll simply copy it over. Sometimes you're just not going to grasp things immediately. Hence the reason why we touch the information. We have multiple touch points for the information. Then I would reread the notes aloud for another 30 minutes. So whatever I got written in the past hour to 30 minutes, I would just read that out loud for 30 minutes, which is why a timer is so important. Everything is time-based. So I'd reread the notes aloud. Now, slight caveat here. During rereading these notes, I would record myself reading these notes out loud. Then I would reward myself after doing these three things. I'd go play some FIFA. I'd probably give myself a cookie. I don't know whatever your reward is, but reward yourself. Create a feedback loop after every 90-minute cycle of focus work. Then finally, touching on the point prior to reward yourself, which is reread the notes aloud, and the little caveat I gave you, which is recording it. What I would do is, let's say I studied for 90 minutes, right before bedtime or before it's time to go to bed. Whatever I read out loud for the past 30 minutes, I would listen to that recording right before I go to bed. The main reason being is that your subconscious mind is more powerful than your conscious mind. And when you are passively doing something, your brain remembers these things. Your brain absorbs all the information. I don't know if you ever experienced this before, but I've experienced this a lot of times. And it's a scenario where I would hear a song. I would feel like it's the first time I'm hearing the song. But for some reason, I know the song. I know the lyrics. I know the beat. I actually know the song. But I've never actively sat down and listened to the song and given energy to the lyrics. But my subconscious mind picked up on the song over time. So that just goes to show the power of the subconscious mind. And a lot of the times I would remember things purely because I remembered how I pronounced the word. So I pronounce a word probably differently to how someone else would, and I would remember it. It also helps with teaching your friends. So when you teach your friends might ask you a question, or they might repeat what you said, but they might pronounce it slightly differently. And it might be funny how they pronounce it. This happened to me in an exam. My friend used to pronounce a word funnily, and I remember the word in the exam because of how funnily he pronounced the word. So this just highlights how important it is to essentially have the information being input into your brain through multiple forms of stimuli. Multiple forms of stimuli. The more stimuli that you input the information into your brain through, the more likely it is to stick. So this is the ultimate study stack. I hope it's helpful. You could copy it in your own way. You could do an hour. You could do 2 hours straight and then just adjust how you read notes, write notes, whatever you want to do. But this is what I personally use. This is what works for me best. After 90 minutes, I kind of get tired. So I like the 90 minutes. It's a nice sweet spot in terms of your brain being able to actually function properly. So that was my ultimate study stack, and I hope that was helpful.